from Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and here's what's coming up. K-State's Dallas Peterson will outline the newly announced regulations on how dicamba herbicide can be applied to extend soybean and cotton crops starting in 2018 under the new classification as a restricted use pesticide. Dallas will go over what you producers need to be aware of there. Also, K-State's Justin Waggoner will talk about how you cow-calf producers can benefit from the Brands program as you map out well-balanced rations for your herds. He'll be discussing that in more detail at the upcoming 5-State Beef Conference, co-sponsored by K-State. And on this week's K-State Horticulture segment later on, Dennis Patton offers a few simple guidelines for bringing container plants indoors. Plus more on this Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
On our first segment, we're going to take up a topic that has captured a headline or two. In recent days, the Environmental Protection Agency has announced some new restrictions on the use of dicamba herbicide in specific crop production systems. And this has been something that's been welling up here the last year or so. Along with this is Dallas Peterson, a weed management specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Dallas, this is associated with the advent of new seed technology, which popped onto the scene here last year. To paint the picture here a little further, remind us of the issue at hand.
Well, Xtend soybeans actually were introduced in 2016, but on a very limited basis. Those are soybeans that have a gene in them that gives them resistance to dicamba herbicide. The catch in 2016 was that there were no labeled dicamba products to use on those soybeans. And so we didn't plant many in Kansas. There were quite a few planted in some other parts of the country, most notably in Arkansas and Missouri, and consequently, people utilized some of the non-labeled dicamba products, and we had a lot of off-target injury problems. And so that created quite an unawareness. They did get approvals of the dicamba products that are lower in volatility for use on the Xtend soybeans this year. And so really 2017 was the first full commercialization year of that system, if you will. And we have some crops that are very susceptible to very low dicamba concentrations, including non-Xtend soybeans. And so there was some concerns about, what we would deal with this year. We'd hope that with the low volatility products, that would be minimized. But unfortunately, again, we did have quite a few more problems with off-target injury from dicamba on those Xtend crops than what we were hoping for.
And to the point where, again, the Environmental Protection Agency has rendered some changes regarding the use of dicamba for these systems, right?
Well, yeah, the problem was fairly widespread throughout most of the soybean growing areas and did create quite a lot of concerns about what the impact was going to be, and time still will tell a little bit on that. But nonetheless, nobody wants off-target movement and damage to not only to soybeans, but to other susceptible species as well. And so there has been some movement by EPA to make some changes to try to minimize that from happening on such a wide-scale basis again in the future.
Let's detail those changes. And dicamba, for this purpose, is now listed as a restricted use pesticide for this system.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, it's specific only to these products that are labeled for use on the Xtend crops. And there are 3 of those currently. That would be Xtend-Max from Monsanto, Fexapan from DuPont, and Ingenia from BASF. So those all are going to be classified now as restricted use products. And what that means is that they can only be purchased and applied by certified applicators or under the supervision, at least, of a certified applicator. Many growers that make their own applications are already certified, to be honest with you, because there are other pesticides that are restricted use, such as atrazine, for example. That also then brings along some additional record-keeping requirements as far as applications are concerned, and even beyond what is normally required for the use of restricted-use pesticides. There's going to be even some other record requirements for the use of these products. So that'll help at least track a little bit better, perhaps, when and how these applications were made, and then we can go back and check those records when a problem does arise.
However, and you believe this may be more pertinent to our producers directly, there are now declared limitations on conditions in which dicamba can be applied.
Right. There are some additional application requirements that will go into effect, but there were already some pretty stringent application requirements. For example, last year they could be applied at wind speeds between 3 and 15 mile an hour. That maximum wind speed has been reduced from 15 down to 10 mile an hour now. And all applications are prohibited at wind speeds less than 3 mile an hour. That was the case with a couple of the products last year. With the other product, you actually could apply it at less than wind speed of 3 mile an hour if you could determine that there indeed was no temperature inversion, because all applications are prohibited during a temperature inversion. So now they're all consistent, only application between 3 and 10 mile an hour. Some of the other restrictions that have been applied, now you can only apply them from sunrise to sunset, so only during the daylight hours. That, again, is meant to try to minimize applications during temperature inversions. And a lot of us don't understand temperature inversions that well, or when they actually occur, but temperature inversions occur generally as the sun is starting to go down in the evening, and they can persist then even after the sun starts to come up in the morning. And when we have a temperature inversion, we have a much greater risk of having off-target movement, probably both of very fine suspended droplets, maybe as well as from vapors coming off those application areas. So, again, the intent there is to try to minimize those applications during that fairly vulnerable time frame.
So these particulars you just listed, they could be very much the limiting factor for producers who want to still employ the Xtend system?
Well, it really does restrict when we can make applications. And again, intuitively, we think the best time to spray is when the winds are calm, oftentimes in the evening or early in the morning. But again, that's when we have the greatest risk for temperature inversions. And again, by law, you need to abide by what that label states. So it really could limit the total time frame in which we can make these applications. And really, for them to be most effective, it needs to be done in a timely manner when the weeds are still small. And so that definitely is a consideration, that you need to abide by that label and, avoid those times when you can't apply it.
We should acknowledge, Dallas, that at least in some states, there may be additional restrictions applied to dicamba usage, although nothing appears to be forthcoming yet here in the state of Kansas.
Well, that's right. And in fact, this past year, there were some additional state restrictions in Arkansas and Tennessee and Missouri, because that kind of seemed to be the epicenter of where they were having the problems. And some of those did relate to, what hours of the day, for example, they could make those applications. There also is a lot of talk about cutoff dates, because it seemed like we're at greatest risk also as we move later into the post-emergence season, after, a lot of the soybeans have been planted and are growing. And to be honest with you, also when we have warmer temperatures, because it seems like, there is some relationship there as well. So some states probably will implement cutoff dates, maybe the 1st of June, maybe the middle of June. Arkansas actually already has, I think, come up with the 1st of April, so a fairly early cutoff date in that case. So we don't know if that might be the case in other states, including Kansas. Kansas is fairly unique compared to some of those states to the east of us, because we have always used a lot of dicamba in our cropping systems, especially in the western half of the state, even throughout the entire summer to help control weeds during wheat stubble fallow period. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess, if any of those state restrictions are implemented, but probably not as likely here as in some of those other states. And if so, it probably would be a little bit later, and probably would be specific to these products again and not necessarily to all dicamba products.
What do you think, considering all of this, and it's still a story unfolding, Dallas, will be the ultimate impact on this seed technology and the weed control system that aligns with it, the dicamba tolerance? Will this be something of a deterrent to the system? What's your thought?
Well, really, most people that did utilize the system last year were very happy with the weed control results. So, again, if anything, the estimates are that the acreage is going to go up next year, which again raises some concerns again about more off-site movement. I think most growers that used it probably will continue to utilize it, and there will be some expansion. One of the ways to protect yourself, of course, is to also plant, the Xtend soybeans. Now, you can argue about whether you should have to do that or not, and I would say you shouldn't have to do that. We don't want any off-site movement, whether you're the one that's making those applications or whether you're the ones that might be getting drifted onto. So I think, if anything, again, it just emphasizes the need to be even more diligent with those applications, follow those guidelines. Maybe try to make those applications as early as possible in the season. To avoid that, again, maybe be aware of, as we get into the warmer times of the year, that there is more potential for some off-target movement. There's still a lot of debate within the scientific community about whether it's mostly particle drift or whether it's vapor drift. Definitely, if it's vapor drift, again, temperature becomes a factor there. Again, it's going to be available. I think it's just critical that we be as careful with the technology as possible.
Once more, the decision has been made by the Environmental Protection Agency to bring about these additional restrictions on dicamba usage on the dicamba-tolerant soybeans and cotton. Be asking questions. Stay tuned for more information and bone up on what's going on here if, in fact, you are intending to utilize this system in the future. Dallas, we appreciate the update and the briefing right here. Thanks, and we'll talk again soon.
Very good.
He's Dallas Peterson, a weed control specialist, K-State Research and Extension. And we'll have more in a moment on Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. For you now on this part of Agriculture Today, a glance ahead to a series of events that are set for the early part of November. And K-State Research and Extension is a co-sponsor of the 5-state beef conferences. We're going to talk now with the individual who's coordinating this from the K-State end, Justin Waggoner, Beef Systems Specialist, K-State Research and Extension. He is based in southwest Kansas. Now, K-State is partnering up with 3 other land-grant institutions to put on this program, correct?
That's correct, Eric. We are partnering with, on this particular program, with Oklahoma State, New Mexico State University, and the Texas AgriLife Extension, so Texas A&M. This is a conference that we've been partnering together, those of us that are in that 5-state region, so where Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado, and Kansas meet. This will actually be the 9th edition of this program, and we hold it in 3 of the states every year. So this year we're going to be in Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas.
And we will outline the specific locations in just a moment. What's the intent of this conference, and to whom is it aimed generally within the beef production sector?
So our primary audience for this particular conference would be cow-calf and stocker operators in those regions. This part of the world is really kind of on the edge of all of our respective institutions, and so it's really a good opportunity for us to come together and share resources and try to reach that audience.
And you try to develop a cross-section of subject matter here to address contemporary concerns for the cow-calf and stocker operator, right?
That's right. We generally have anywhere from 4 to 5 presentations on the agenda for each one of the the meetings. We start the evening off historically with a market outlook. This year at all of our locations, Darrell Peel with Oklahoma State is going to be sharing his outlook with us. Then next we're going to discuss some of the factors affecting calf prices and, why are certain calves worth more than others, and how do feeders or potential buyers of those calves view some of those traits. And our presenter on that is going to be Dr. Britt Hicks with Oklahoma State University. We're also going to be talking about transition strategies and estate transfer, and that's going to be Tiffany Dow-Lashment, who's with Texas A&M University, and then Cole Swanser, who's with another outside entity, is going to be covering that topic at two of the locations. Then we'll also talk a little bit about cow-calf nutrition.
And that will be your segment. You will be highlighting the brands program, and we want to expand on that a little bit. You will be at a couple of the sessions. Your colleague out of Texas A&M, Ted McCollum, will be another presenting this information. And what is the brands program, Justin?
So the brands program is a ration balancing software program that Kansas State University invested in several years ago. Essentially, BRAND stands for Beef Ration and Nutrition Decision Software. And so, essentially, it's a series of Excel spreadsheets. And what it's really set up to do is to aid producers in answering some of those basic questions of, well, if my cows are on native grass, how much supplement do I need to be feeding them? It also there's several modules in it, from a cow-calf all the way to a feed yard growing backgrounding diet that fit those kind of cattle, where we can balance those rations in a pretty quick fashion. We believed enough in the program that we put it in a number of our county offices, so any of our majority of our county offices should have that software program or have access to it through a specialist. It's a very robust software. It can answer very simple questions, but it can also go in and dig a little bit deeper and really dial in our nutrition management scenarios for a producer.
There are two modules of interest to the cow-calf operation, the beef cow module, and it's going to look at several criteria. The heifer module will take a bit of a different angle with some special criteria in as far as the likely success of that heifer in her first calving. Then those are very valuable tools to work with, are they not?
Yeah, that's correct. And essentially, all the models work in essentially a pretty similar fashion. We have the basic inputs for the animal where we kind of define, for example, the mature weight of the cow, what's her lactation potential, where is she at in terms of her stage of production, anywhere from a dry cow to a second trimester cow, third trimester, and then post-calving. We can even split that out even further. One of the things I really like with the software is we can look at a management scenario or a nutrition program, and we can actually, with just the simple click of a button, change a cow from third trimester to early lactation and see how that changes our feeding program, how close we are to meeting those requirements. And so what we're going to be doing with the software at this conference is essentially just walking through some of those scenarios, really allow producers to test drive that software that is available to them at no cost through their county extension office. It's a great tool for us to be able to answer questions in a quick fashion for our producers. It
allows that cow-calf operator to come up with basically a prescription ration for their situation then.
That's correct. In a lot of situations, we can generate a ration sheet for those producers quickly and kind of give them some pretty quick feedback in terms of how closely their program is either meeting or hopefully exceeding their cow's nutrient requirements.
Very good. Once again, it's called the Beef Ration and Nutrition Decisions software that K-State makes available to producers. It'll be on full display during Justin's presentation and demonstration of how it works at the 5-State Beef Conference. One more part of this overall program at each of the sites, there will be a closer look at using beef basis tools for calf marketing.
The Beef Basis software, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's basically K-State Ag Econ and several other entities, came together and put together some very useful tools for producers in terms of looking at price expectation in the marketplace, what a respective set of calves might be worth. There's a whole host of tools that are available on this Beef Basis site. And so Brett Crosby with Custom Ag Solutions who I believe does do some work with that website, is going to kind of share and highlight some of the tools and the information that are available there for producers.
So this program in total is really loaded up with information for producers over that late afternoon and evening session at each of the sites. There's something for just about every cow-calf operator in this, is there not, Justin?
There is, and you know, in today's cow-calf industry and where we're at currently in our situation, we always tend to talk about on these programs a lot about feed costs, and there's so many other factors that kind of play into the profitability of a cow-calf enterprise. And so what's nice about this program is I think we touch on not only the nutrition, but some of these other things. How do you get the most out of your calf crop? You know, what resources do we have in terms of beef basis to help producers make those timely marketing decisions? And then, you know, the transition strategy of, well, we're looking at bringing back another family member or a son or a daughter back into the operation. How do we do that successfully?
Excellent. So, and we'll repeat these, the dates and locations: Tuesday, November the 7th, Boise City, Oklahoma; Wednesday, the 8th of November, Perryton, Texas; and lastly, the session in Kansas. It'll be at Ashland on Thursday, November the 9th. As far as participating, what must one do in advance here, Justin?
Simply contact the Clark County Extension Office. Bryce Gibson is our county extension agent there. The registration deadline is November 3rd, and there is a small fee in terms of registration of $15.
Again, they'd like you to register for that session no later than November the 3rd, and you can contact the Clark County Extension Office. They'll also find further information on these meetings online, will they not?
They will.
And that would be at?
www.ksubbeef.org.
Again, at the ksubbeef.org website. And Justin, even if a producer doesn't live in the immediate proximity of one of these meetings, it's well worth their while to travel on in a reasonable distance to take these in, right?
That's correct. We tend to draw audience participation from a wide swath of country, so we'd be glad to have them.
This is the 5-state beef conference. K-State is teaming up with Oklahoma State University, New Mexico State University, and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension to put these on coming up in early November. We'll repeat the dates and locations in just a moment. Justin, good luck with these, and thank you so much.
Thanks again, Eric.
Beef Systems Specialist with K-State Research and Extension, based in Southwest Kansas, Justin Waggoner. The 5-State Beef Conference Series, 3 locations and meetings: Tuesday, the 7th of November, Boise City, Oklahoma; Wednesday, the 8th, Perryton, Texas; and Thursday, the 9th, at Ashland, Kansas. Particulars at ksubeef.org, or for the Kansas session, get in touch with the Clark County Extension Office, which is the host county for this event. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. Now, this break, and when we return, today's agricultural news headlines, including their new developments in that proposal to build a major poultry production and processing complex here in Kansas. 3 new potential locations in the state have been identified. We'll have details on that. Greg Akagi awaits with this week's Kansas soybean update. And once more, we'll have the weekly K-State horticulture segment for you. Our guest will talk about successfully transitioning those houseplants from the outdoors to the indoors as our weather cools down. All that straight ahead here on the K-State Radio Network. Please keep it right here.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson here. And continuing on now with today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy, in part, of DTN. The Kansas Department of Agriculture has been informed by Tyson Foods that company has narrowed the list of cities who submitted their application to be considered for their proposed new poultry complex down to 3. The company's original plans, you'll recall, were to build that proposed $320 million poultry complex south of Tonganoxie in Leavenworth County. After protests from county residents and county commissioners pulling their support, Tyson Foods announced back September 19th they were putting the proposed complex on hold to evaluate other options around the state and other states who have expressed interest. Officials from areas which are being considered confirmed their status in regard to the Tyson Foods poultry complex. In Cloud County, Ashley Hutchinson is with Cloud Corp. That's the economic development arm for Cloud County. She says they're staying in touch with state officials as they prepare to finalize their proposal. She told KNCK Radio that she wants to be very open with people about the project and said that their team consists of the City of Concordia, USD 333 Concordia, Cloud County Community College, the economic development teams in Republic and Saline counties, among others. That team also involves the Northwest Kansas Economic Innovation Center. That's a private foundation established to benefit Northwest Kansas, working in concert with the Dane G. Hansen Foundation. In Sedgwick County, multiple media outlets reported that Sedgwick County is one of the 3 areas being considered. The Greater Wichita Partnership issued a response after being told they were being considered, saying that they will require due diligence and research for both parties in the process, and that they're excited to continue to discuss the potential project with Tyson. And in Montgomery County, multiple media outlets report that the Coffeyville area is one of the 3 being considered. Montgomery County Action Council Executive Director Trish Purdon told KGGF Radio in Coffeyville that they want to thoroughly consider every perspective and gather questions from the communities as they progress through the process. Coffeyville City Manager Kendall Francis also told KGGF that based on the history of agriculture-based businesses in the Coffeyville area and throughout that county, they believe they have the right components to support this type of industry. Reno County commissioners say that the proposed area within their county will not be considered and that they are out of the running. The External Communications Director with Tyson, Worth Sparkman, in an email statement, says that the Kansas Department of Agriculture helped them narrow the search from a few communities that offer the infrastructure, the labor pool, the farmer interest, and land required for the investment. A KDA spokesperson said that Tyson will spend the next couple of months evaluating the areas and the communities that they will consider. With concerns about the renewable fuels standard bubbling over, the president and the administrator of the EPA reached out to Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds yesterday to reassure her that the RFS is safe. President Trump reiterated his support for the renewable fuels standard during a rally in Iowa last summer. He did so again on the phone with Reynolds yesterday morning, according to the governor, that shared during a news conference yesterday afternoon. Reynolds said she also spoke with EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt by phone yesterday, garnering similar support from him, that is, on the RFS. The EPA announced in a notice of proposal to further reduce the renewable volume blend requirements for advanced biofuels, biomass-based diesel volumes for 2018 and 19, and the total renewable fuel volumes in the renewable fuel standard. The EPA is also reportedly considering a proposal from Valero Energy to leave renewable identification numbers, or RINs, attached to U.S. ethanol gallons produced in the U.S. and exported. Currently, those credits are removed from the exported gallons. The biofuels industry is concerned that doing so would flood the market with RINs and harm domestic biofuel producers. Now, Reynolds said she made it clear to the president and to Pruitt that the standard is important in rural America at a time when agricultural commodity prices are depressed and jobs are on the line. The public comment period closes today on the proposal that could lead to further cuts in the renewable fuels standard. Now, back on Monday, Reynolds, along with Kansas Governor Sam Brownback, Missouri Governor Eric Greitens, and South Dakota Governor Dennis DeGard, sent a letter to the president saying that the recently proposed cuts to the 1819 RFS volumes are concerning and run counter to the president's repeated commitment to the standard and to rural America. Next up, this week's Kansas soybean update for you. Here's Greg Akagi.
Doug Bounds, Kansas State statistician for USDA's National Ag Statistics Service, is joining us. And Doug, several reports have come out here just recently, and that includes the latest as far as crop progress and fall harvest is concerned for Kansas soybeans. What have we seen recently on how far we've progressed harvest-wise?
The Kansas Crop Progress and Condition Report for the week ending October 15 showed that the soybean condition rated 5% very poor, 14% poor, 37% fair, 39% good, and 5% excellent. Also showed that soybeans dropping leaves was 93%. That's ahead of 86% last year and 87% for the 5-year average. Soybean harvest was 34% complete, and that's ahead of 25% this time last year and near the 5-year average of 36%.
And as we're about a third of the way through the harvest, one thing to look at is potentially we could be harvesting a record soybean crop here in the state of Kansas, according to the latest crop production numbers.
That is correct. Kansas Crop Production Report that was released on October 12th showed soybean production based on October 1st conditions to be forecasted a record 209 million bushels, up 9% from last year's production. Kansas farmers expect to harvest 5.1 million acres of soybeans this year, and that's 27% higher than last year. The yield that's forecasted for 2017 in Kansas is 41 bushels per acre, and that's just down 7 bushels from last year's yield.
And late in September, we also had an additional report came out. How are we looking as far as our grain stocks are concerned?
September 29th, NASA released the Kansas Grain Stocks Report showing grain stocks as of September 1st. And on that date, we had 11.1 million bushels of old crop soybeans still stored in all positions in Kansas. That's 108% higher than it was a year ago. Of that total, 1.6 million bushels were stored on farm. That's up 116% from a year ago. And 9.52 million bushels were stored off farm, which was up 107% from 2016.
All right, Doug, we appreciate you updating us on those numbers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg.
That is Doug Bounds, Kansas State statistician for USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. And this is Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Agriculture Today returns now, and for you, this week's K-State Horticulture segment. The weather is turning, as typical at this stage in the fall. And for those of you who have featured container-grown ornamental flowers and plants on your patio or deck or wherever in your outdoor setting over this past spring and summer, it is approaching that time to bring those plants indoors to protect them through the late fall and early winter. Some thoughts along that line, courtesy of our guest, Dennis Patton. Dennis is the Research and Extension Horticultural Agent for Johnson County, northeast Kansas. Not with a great deal of haste necessarily here, because we've had nice weather, and so far a hard freeze has not occurred across the better part of Kansas, but that time is approaching, Dennis, for folks to be thinking about bringing those plants indoors.
That is correct. There's many different types of plants we've had out on our patios and our gardens over the summer months that we want to save and put back out the following year. And now is a good time. We really need to get those in before that first frost comes so they're not damaged.
Do we see differences in sensitivity with our plants to the cooler weather? Say we get down into that 35, 34 degree range. Are some plants more prone to damage than others in those conditions?
Well, that's a great question, Eric, and it really kind of depends on the type of plant. Many plants that we consider house plants have now found their ways out to patios and decks and front porches. And many of those plants actually are tropical plants that are native to very warm jungle-type climates. And for some of those, even temperatures in the upper 50s and low 50s could actually cause some leaf yellowing and discoloration of the plant. So it kind of depends on the plant. But yes, what we're going to see if we leave our plants out too long is just with the trees and other things, some of the leaves starting to yellow and start to wither as the plant gets ready to prepare itself for dormancy, or in this case, plants that are not winter hardy would be killed by a frost or damaged by that first frost.
So if one has any doubts whatsoever about the durability of their plant in the case of cooler conditions, why, bring it indoors to be on the safe side.
That's right. You really want to be bringing it indoors. What I usually tell people, when our nighttime temperatures probably drop down into the 50s consistently, then it's probably time to start moving them in if we want to make sure we have no ill effects of that cool snap coming in on the plants.
Relocating those plants to the indoor setting then. And the first and foremost thing that you've always talked up is making sure that you place them in a location with adequate light, correct?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge for when we overwinter our plants indoors, is even in a shady location is probably more sunny or more bright light than most places in our home. So even if a plant was growing in a shady location outside, you probably still want to put it more into a sunny location inside the home, just to compensate for those lower light levels, shorter intensity of duration. Because what's going to tend to happen to many of those plants brought in is we're going to probably see the plant dropping some leaves, some yellowing of foliage, because the plant is going to go through what we call acclimation. In other words, it's going to take 2 to 3 months probably between the time we bring the plant in and it really starts to drop some foliage and things. So it's kind of a slow process over winter. And sometimes I tell people that are overwintering their plants indoors, the goal is not really to get them to grow and thrive, but their goal is keep them alive so you can boot them back out the next spring and have another season of color.
So then if one would see their plant losing foliage, they shouldn't panic too much. That plant may be perfectly healthy. It's just a part of that transitional process.
Yeah, that's right. Lower light levels mean the plant just can't be as efficient in manufacturing food, and so it's going to slough off those older, unproductive leaves in favor of the newer, younger, productive leaves. So that's quite typical to have happen. And then a lot of times people see yellow leaves, they think, well, I'm not watering it enough, so then they water more. And a lot of times those plants are coming back inside. We're going to use less water because they're not going to dry out as rapidly as being outside. Or they might also want to feed it more, thinking, I'm losing leaves, I need to feed it more. And actually, we probably don't want to really feed these plants at all over the winter months. As I said a second ago, our goal is really to keep them alive, not really force them to grow. And so we want to maybe slack off on the water a little bit, and then just withhold fertilization until we boot them back out again in the spring.
Another consideration when one brings their plants inside, where they locate them with respect to the humidity levels. And that is to say, those plants can dry out severely if they're put in the wrong spot, right?
That's correct. A lot of times in our home construction, we try to get those plants in front of our windows. But I know in my own house, in front of every window is also my heat register where the hot air blows out from the furnace during the winter months. And that dry air will just cook the foliage of the plant and then cause a lot of the margins of the leaves to turn brown. So we also need to kind of watch where we set the plants, because winter air in a home is just dry, and most plants, especially those tropical plants, really are more happy in a little bit more humid environment.
Is it a good idea, following up on that then, Dennis, to mist plants every once in a while?
Misting probably actually makes you feel better than it really helps the plant. Misting a plant once a day, once a week is really not going to provide that higher humidity. If you do have plants that like higher humidity, you could always try the shallow pebble tray with water that slowly evaporates and then set the plant on top of that. But of course, we don't want that root system setting in water, taking up water that's going to cause problems with the health of the roots.
Once one commits to bringing a plant indoors, and then say we have a long stretch of rather warm weather for this time of the year, would one be doing the wrong thing by moving that plant in and out of doors during this time?
Yeah, that's real tempting to do. Or in the spring, people do the same thing. We get a warm spell, so they boot the plants back out. Once you move them in the fall, I would leave them in until we warm up, so those nighttime temperatures in the spring are probably staying consistently in the upper 50s at night, because moving them in, moving them out just creates more stress on them, not knowing really how to react.
All right. Any other final tips on houseplant maintenance once those ornamentals are moved indoors?
Well, sometimes you want to do a little quick spot check for some insects. There can be some spiders, some roly-polies, and other things that kind of find their way in the home. So you might want to just wipe down the containers really well. And then maybe for a couple weeks or so, you might want to isolate them away from any of your other house plants, just in case you brought some aphids or something in that then potentially could explode during the winter months.
Be thinking about bringing ornamental plants in containers indoors very soon. And Dennis, as always, thanks for the input.
Thanks. I appreciate talking to you, Eric.
That's Dennis Patton. He's the horticultural agent, K-State Research and Extension in Johnson County, on our weekly K-State Horticulture segment. That caps off today's edition. Thanks for listening in. Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.